That's the beauty of human development, that we can have that every day is an opportunity to change something that we don't agree with at that point of our lives, right? It's an opportunity to revisit, to get curious, to just like really ask, do I want to pass it on? So I think all of us have that. Clearly, I have that. Be doing that work if I wasn't my own journey of healing and unpacking and understanding.
For some people, having a traumatic past isn't just their own background, but it's in the background of generations before them. How do parents help their own kids heal from generational trauma and help them achieve their biggest dreams still? Luckily for you today, I have our special guest. Her name is Marina O'Connor. She's a trauma therapist and a serial entrepreneur. She helps parents to reconnect with themselves, and when their parents have an emotional awareness about their wounds, they can emotionally bond with their own children. So welcome, Marina.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited to talk to you because I think there are so many of us who have big T traumas, little T traumas. We have experiences in our lives. And when we talk about the generational impact of trauma, sometimes that can get confusing to people. So do you mind taking just a minute and explaining to us what generational trauma really is in your own words?
Yeah, of course. So I think just when I think of transgenerational work, there's a broader element than trauma. Kind of, I work with transgenerational scenarios, and this is implicit knowledge that each of us carries, right? Because we all belong to a family system, and this family system has a very strong influence on us, on our belief systems, right? On how we see the world, how we see relationships, how we see love, because each of us would have different interpretations of what love means. Kind of everything, all of those things are a part of those transgenerational scenarios. And some of that knowledge is wonderful and amazing, and some of that knowledge could be about permissions and some just amazing things that can be passed on from one generation to the next. And some of those things can be those negative experiences that can be traumatic, right? And they connect to any kind of unresolved, unprocessed trauma, which kind of has a tendency to be carried from one generation to the next, and sometimes for several generations, right? And those influences could be just around some of the destructive transgenerational scenarios. It could be pattern, I don't know, it could be patterns like abandonment, or it could be patterns like lack of love, or it could be patterns like unhappy relationships, or it could be patterns like emotional loneliness, or it could be patterns like addictions or abuse, whatever they are. So I think when parents carry unresolved trauma, children tend to internalize it, right? Because when trauma happens to us, especially early on, especially if it's developmental or childhood trauma, right, then it disrupts our connection with ourselves, right? So there is going to be that internal sense, disconnection or shattering, that makes it very difficult for people to connect with themselves, with whole self, as opposed to they might find it easier to connect to certain part of themselves that they find welcome or good enough or how they should be. But then there's going to be quite a deep sense of internal disconnection. And for those parents, it can be really difficult to connect with their children, right? Because if we're not connected with ourselves, then we can't connect with other people. So I think that's broadly what my work is, to work with those transgenerational scenarios, to help people to explore and recognize whose scenario they're living or reliving, right? In those ways, to identify some of those patterns, and then just explore the impact on their lives, on their relationships, and I guess find the ways to challenge and change it, right? So this is why kind of the work I do, I call what do we pass on? Because that's the question I've been asking myself since I became a parent. And this is a question that I know many parents ask themselves daily, because think all of the parents, most of the parents want the best for their children. And sometimes they don't have support and the tools to actually give them the best because of that trauma that they might carry. Yeah.
So really, I think if I'm understanding kind of the process, so what could happen is maybe we have some unresolved, maybe we feel cold or we feel callous at times to our kids. And maybe that was something that was passed on to us from our parents and from an experience that their parents had. And we were not even identifying that, but we just know that there's something inside of us that we don't like in how we respond to our kids. And that's maybe, is that kind of how you figure out that there's some sort of trauma there to begin with?
I think there are many ways how we can feel that there is some kind of wound that's being reactivated in any kind of intimate relationship. But I think parenting is such a key relationship in that, because with our children, we're going to recycle every single developmental stage that we've had ourselves, right? So we're going to constantly have every day, sometimes, those really powerful messages from the past almost, right? They're going to be in here and now, but we're going to be reminded of everything that we have received. We're also going to be reminded of everything that we haven't received. And I think because we humans parent based on what they've received, right? We're similar to animals in that way, right? Because modeling comes through our parenting, and from there we can either we're going to do the same, right? Or we're going to reject, right? We're going to say, I'm going to do it differently because I don't like what I have received because of maybe how painful or how much criticism I've had or whatever those harmful experiences I've had with my kids. I'm not going to repeat it. So we're going to reject the parenting that we have received. But both of those extremes, in a way, they can be quite problematic because it's almost making a decision from the lack of choice. So the driver in both of those scenarios, I find that it's either we completely don't question something or we question all of it, right? And then we also reject a part of ourselves that we've internalized, that we carry as a result of this core relationships in our life. Because no matter if we want it or not, we're influenced by those primary attachment relationships, right? Even if we reject like a mother figure or a father figure, or maybe it's a grandmother, whoever it is, right, from a family system, then we also reject a part of ourselves that kind of we've internalized as a result of that relationship. So I think there are different ways how we can feel those wounds being poked. It could be an emotional reactivity. It could be in like feelings like shame or grief, for example, like when you become a parent and somehow you're just overwhelmed with grief and it's like very heavy, but you don't really understand where it's coming from. And of course, there's a lot of grief in parenting, right? But if it's like overwhelming, if it's just really heavy and you constantly feel like the presence of that, I think that could be like feelings like rage. And just generally, I think the difficulty of maintaining connection with children when in a way that it might be difficult to hold feelings, or it might be experiences that, oh, I'm not good enough, right? Or I don't believe that I'm a good enough mother. And then how would that kind of change, right? Everything that a parent would do as a result of that kind of very core internal belief.
Yeah. So if you're a parent who's listening right now and you're saying, oh my word, this is me. I don't have kids yet. Maybe I should never have kids. How do they start to work through that? I'm going to say, obviously we need you, but what are the ways that they can start to flag some of that in themselves and figure out how to deal with that?
First, I just want to say in response to what you've said, I think all of us are that parents to some extent, because none of us have received perfect parenting, right? There is no such thing as perfect parents. So I think we're all, to some extent, and obviously it is going to vary depending on our own individual life narratives and experiences, but I think we all have things to work on. And I think that's the beauty of life, and that's the beauty of human development, that we can have that every day is an opportunity to change something that we don't agree with at that point of our lives, right? It's an opportunity to revisit, to get curious, to just like really ask, do I want to pass it on? So I think all of us have that. Clearly, I have that. Be doing that work if I wasn't my own journey of healing and unpacking and understanding. But I guess for me, the first step is to have that question, what do I pass on? To just start to get curious about what we have received as parents. What is my transgenerational scenario? What have I learned about intimacy? What have I learned about parenting? What have I learned about, I don't know, how do I express feelings? What have I learned about how to ask for help and support? Like, how would people react if I would come and I don't know, I would want to share an opinion. Was it welcome? Was it not welcome? So the whole kind of variety of being curious to get to know yourself in the context of those relationships that has those impacts on us. And every belief we have is relational and transgender, every single belief. If you choose any belief that you have about yourself, if you think of the earliest memory that's connected to that belief, and you might not even remember the earliest memory, but there are going to be things that kind of formed that belief, right? And then throughout life, it's those beliefs that are going to impact every choice that we make, right? And so much of that is what we've learned as opposed to who we are, right? So I think that's the, I guess, significance of this work, is to peel off those layers where you can just see yourself.
Okay, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I've never thought about the fact that all of my thoughts were given to me, like, about myself. And that's just mind blowing. But you're right. If you think about different stages of your life, I can remember being very young and not being worried about what anybody else said.
Yeah.
And get to that point where you start worrying about what other people said, and it gets justified somehow in your mind. And that's what you're saying, is you're like peeling it back, and you're almost like this emotional scientist who's paying attention to how people react to you, what you're doing, what the best case scenario is, right?
Yeah, because I think, and especially, of course, with some of those beliefs, then can be very limiting. And I think if we track down, where have we learned? And it's tracking down doesn't mean remembering how, when, what's the moment, but more if we start exploring the connections, the learning. And then there is so many opportunities to change it into what works for us now. And it's interesting, I've just recently was thinking of my own, obviously, I've been working through tons of negative self-beliefs, but something that came up for me recently was like the one where I grew up with that message that you're not an academic, like you're basically rubbish at anything that has to do with studies, because this is how I was in school. And I grew up knowing that I'm just not an academic. So I think that belief, for me, the impact it had, that I was just always get by, like in school, in university, because I was just like, this is how things are. I can't get an amazing grade. Not that I think that this is something that I wanted, but and it wasn't until recently that I realized that's actually not true. That's actually something that I've believed about myself based on kind of some of those. And they were not even verbal messages. They were just non-verbal messages that you're not that academic, and you can't like do all of those things that maybe other people are better at, because you're just you just get by. So I think we all have the whole variety of those things that we believe to be true.
So if you know that, it's interesting that for you, you figured that out and hopefully
Yeah.
that's not true. But how do you change that? Because that's such a pattern. That could be how many years of believing that?
Yeah. Yeah, it could be 40, it could be 50. For some people, it's their whole lives they live. Yeah, this is just things that we don't even question most of the times because of how rigid, how fixed they are. We're going to tend to think, no, this is true because I've always been like that. And some of them can be proverbial, those beliefs. So we are not even going to have like explicit recollection of, like with the beliefs of I'm not good enough, for example. That belief very often is rooted, in quite an early life experiences that we can't actually like explicitly remember with our conscious brain, so I think it's just experimenting and exploring where you're now, and does it feel true now? Does it feel true now that this is like how you are? Is that what you would tell your younger self? Is that kind of what you would want your younger self to believe? And just really question, how would your life be if you were to choose a different belief, right? Because we're unconsciously going to seek confirmation that everything we believe is true, right? So if we're going to say, I don't know, I'm never going to get a better job, we're going to seek confirmation of why this is true, right? If we're going to believe that we're like a bad mother, we're going to constantly seek confirmation of why this is true. Oh, like I snapped at my child. Oh, I don't know, I forgot his gym shoes or whatever. And those are going to be confirmations, whatever they are, right? Some of them might be small, some of them might be significant, but this is true. And this is unconsciously what all of us are doing if we believe something negative about ourselves. We're just going out there and we prove that this is it. This is the truth.
Okay, let's swing this and think about if you were in a household and you believed that you weren't an academic. I'm assuming that you're probably training your child to believe that maybe they're like you and maybe not going to be academic either. But then if you know that is something that's not true, how do you make the household environment less focused on that trauma and more give them the opportunity to go above that? How do you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think that this is such a common scenario, and it's not being an academic is one of the examples, right? How many families you would think in our family, everyone is a lawyer, or like in our family, everyone is this, or everyone is this. So there's like this expectations that are, or the opposite, when parents say, because I haven't done it, now you have to do it. Right? Because I have that, because I wasn't able to achieve something. Now I'm placing all this grief that I have because of my own failures, and I place it on you. And now you have to, as a child, deliver what I wasn't able to achieve myself. And it's almost like there's so many ways how those repetitions can happen. So I think, again, like recognizing those patterns and why, just really understanding what's driving us. Am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for? Am I doing this because this is kind of part of that sense of belonging? And I think that I'm only belong if I do this. There's this constellation where there is a very fixed role that I step into. And when I'm in this role, I belong. When I step out of it, maybe I'm not going to belong. Maybe I'm not going to be part of this family. How would my parents react if I would come and say, oh no, I'm going to write these books, I'm definitely an academic, I'm going to do it's, what would that be? So I think just recognizing again those patterns, asking how do they help or not help with how you envision your life, with where do you want to go? Do you know where you want to go? But just asking those questions, because I don't think many people know that.
Yeah. Yeah, you have
Yeah.
something on your website that talks about our potential. And I thought it just really
Yeah.
caught me because I think many people, where regardless of where they are age-wise in life, they constantly wonder what if and if I ever and when someday I whatever. And it's like they recognize that there's a potential there that they could get to, but something holds them back.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
is your experience with that? What holds people back? Why are there some people that are able to meet their potential and others that can't?
Yeah. I think what holds us back often is the lack of permissions that we receive as part of that parental modeling. And I think those psychological permissions go be yourself, be the best version of yourself, whatever it is for you. I'll support you, I'll be here for you, but you don't need to take care of me, right? Just go and live your life, go and live your life in the way that you see, right? Experiment and explore, but and also you're always part of this family, as opposed to, oh, you can't be doing this, it doesn't work like this, you're not smart enough to do this, who wants that, why do you want that, are you joking, are you serious, is it what you want to do? Like, just comparing how would it feel for a child to be almost living with those different messages. But also when we grow up, we don't learn from what parents say mainly, we learn from what they do with their lives. So I think in that way, parents give powerful permissions, right? If they're happy, if they're following dreams, if they're in intimate relationships, if they're connected with themselves, if they're speaking out, I don't know, their truth, whatever it is, right? If they're not holding themselves back, this is the modeling, this is part of the modeling. And it doesn't mean that they're not going to mess up. We're not going to mess up. We started, I think, a conversation with talking about mess and stuff like that. But I think it's starting with ourselves as a parent and thinking, okay, so what permissions have I received and what haven't I received? Do I have a permission to be successful? Do I have a permission to do what I want? Do I have a permission to, I don't know, try different things? Do I have permission to have like more money than anyone in my family? Do I have permission to just be a mom if I want to, right? Where everyone in my family tells me, no, you have to, like, whatever, be a lawyer. What are those permissions?
That's so okay. I'm just sitting here and thinking of all the things that I've heard from
Yeah.
other it's like my whole life. And it's so fascinating to me because if you just spend just 30 seconds thinking, what do you believe that's probably not true? It
Yeah.
kind of seems like you're flooded with an awful lot. And
Yeah.
what you're saying is just give yourself permission to do those things that you really maybe people told you not to in some sense, but it's that jump from thinking that you have to stay within a box to giving yourself
Yeah.
probably the really difficult.
Yeah. And I like what you said, because I often say that people end up in those boxes if we choose to climb into one. And I think when we grow up, children, we have to basically, we have an adaptation to whatever happens around us. We have to, right? This is just part of the survival. Children are going to keep an attachment with their parents no matter what, because they can't lose it. This is just biology, right? So I think very often what happens is that we take all of that modeling, we take all of those beliefs, we take all of those coping strategies that we've developed early in life as a response to the parenting, right? And we keep using it as we become grown-ups. So those beliefs, they've been created when we were like, I don't know, younger selves, right? Children, that so it's a distorted view of the world, right? That is based on this family context or some limiting life experiences. But very often as adults, we use that to be making choices about what we do. And I think once you understand how outdated some of those beliefs are and how outdated some of those limitations are, you can really start exploring, what do I want? Where do I see myself? What is my idea of, I don't know, marriage, relationships, parenting, work, business wise, and everything else.
Yeah. What if you're a parent who doesn't recall any traumatic events in your life, but you know for a fact that your child has had trauma? Is the process similar? What can I do for my kids if I don't have that same experience or that same understanding?
Yeah, I think we never have same experiences, even if when people have what seems to be the same trauma, right? Our experiences are going to be very different because trauma is an individual interpretation. Mm-hmm. Right. And this is what makes experiences traumatic. It's not, this is the list of things that you get traumatized by. And if you fall on this list, this is what you're going to have. This is how you're going to heal. It's more complex than that. And we don't still understand trauma fully and the impact on our self, on our bodies. But I think no trauma is the same. So I think if anyone carries trauma, that I think I would say one of the most important thing that we can do for anyone who carries trauma, for ourselves or other people in our lives, is just to be witnesses to their pain, to be witnesses to their pain, to offer them that relationship, that space, that relational space that can be like one of the vehicles for healing, whatever that journey might be. So I think when something happens to our children, as a parent, just being that secure relationship that can be there in whatever form that they might need, and it might change. It's almost like anchor, safety anchor that just holds all the feelings that arise as people navigate all of those complex effects of trauma.
Yeah, because I'm sure, I love your answer. And I'm thinking like in a home, let's say there's a traumatic experience to the child and the child is trying to be with people that didn't have the experience. I love the fact that you're just saying, just be there and feel what they're experiencing, because I guess in my mind's eye, a child doesn't always know how to even express what's going on. And so having that openness and that communication or that trust that you're talking about with them is probably just like huge for just the healing process itself.
Yeah. I think kind of trauma is relational, right? Because I think we get harmed in relationship, we get healed in relationship. And I think that experience of being seen in a relationship with your vulnerabilities, with your pain, maybe with your inability to express what you need or how you feel, with your just as you are, without having to justify or like rescue or fix or all of those things that we do for other people, and just holding that space for anyone. And I think, again, when we talk about transgenerational scenarios, just being mindful of what are the relational patterns that we create in our own relationships. What is it part of the modeling that our children witness? What do we pass on in that context? Because every experience will have an impact, good or negative or whatever. So I think just questioning that is quite a big step to have that awareness.
And that's probably the first thing that you can do too. I think the first best step. Good.
Yeah, and I think it's like an ongoing process. It's not a destination to heal from transgenerational trauma or to heal from any trauma, because I think people want to believe that there is like a final stop where it's a journey right? So it's a little bit more of an awareness. It's a little bit more of coping skills. It's a little bit more of connection as opposed to disconnection. It's a little bit more of permissions, but there's always going to be layers, right? And anyone chooses how deep they want to go, and I guess, and where do they want to move to in their lives.
If there is somebody out there, and I know there is, who really wants to get a hold of you and to ask more questions specifically to their situation, where are the best places to find you and to connect?
Yeah, I have a website. So if you Google my name, there's a website. So I'm on Instagram as well if you Google my name. So I think with social media, it's quite easy to find each other. So yeah, I think if anyone feels curiosity or if anyone has any questions, I'm always try to respond when I have kind of time and resources. So it might not be like fast, but I'm very open. I love talking about this. So yeah, so I'm out there and there are ways to get in touch.
And unfortunately, you're far away. You're in Portugal, is that right?
Yeah.
We can just come see you then.
Yes, exactly. I love that. I love that. To do another podcast here somewhere next to the beach.
I think that would be a really great business. Yes.
Yeah. Actually, one of the things that I am going to mention that I really want to do in the near future. So I have this program that's called What Do We Pass On? And this is a program for parents and everyone else who want to, do this work around transgenerational scenarios and to reconnect with their potential. And so hopefully I'm going to do a retreat for everyone who wants to come to Portugal and also just enjoy the beauty and the ocean and the forest, because I live in the most beautiful place. So hopefully there's going to be an opportunity in the future to do that, because that's something that's on my list of things that I'd like to make happen.
I think that would heal somebody right there.
Yeah, nature where I live is healing. Outside of kind of the work I do, I think there is so much opportunities to heal just in nature. So yeah, so I believe that this is something that we're lacking often, just being in nature and being still connected. Yeah.
I love that. Okay, tell us the name of it one more time. Of the conference.
The name
of the event you want to hold, the retreat.
Oh no, the retreat I haven't. It's going to be all information once I do it and I have the dates. It's going to be on my website. It's going to be on my Instagram. It's not yet. This is going to be like in the near future. But yeah, but if anyone is interested in What Do We Pass On program, then yeah, there is all information. Follow me, and I'm going to try to be more organized in my social media presence as well.
Marina, this has been just great. And I really appreciate you've given us so much a wealth of information, and honestly, like a trip to Portugal to find out more.
It's a beautiful place. Yeah. And I think if you haven't been, put it on your list. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Thank you so much for your time today.
Yes. And thank you for having me. It was fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.